Hello my loves, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Hi, hello, my name is Loey, and my attire ties into what I'm going to be talking about today. And you might be sitting at home asking yourself, Lo, how does a unicorn Target holiday sweater tie into Ouija boards in Christmas time? I got this absolutely incredible sweater from Target recently, and when I was buying it, I saw that there was like this buy two, get one free sale on board games. And I was like, you know, when I moved, I got rid of most of my board games, so I was getting Monopoly, I was getting Trouble, and I came across this Stranger Things Ouija board for sale. Part of a buy two, get one free promotion on board games was a Ouija board. And I bought it, do as I say, not as I do. I'm a terrible, terrible example. And I mostly bought it because I thought it would be kind of interesting. I want to collect Ouija boards, although it hasn't gone very well for me so far. You guys know the whole thing with my vintage Ouija board going missing in the midst of my entire apartment being haunted, fiasco series, whatever you want to call it. But anyways, I had gotten it just because I wanted to have it as like a wall decoration or something. But it kind of brought to my attention that Ouija boards are kind of just considered board games in today's day and age. And they are something that people will get for Christmas, whether it is, you know, just as like a gag gift or it's a real present that maybe they want to play with. Today I'm going to tell you why you don't want a Ouija board for Christmas. Why you don't want to ask Santa for one for Christmas, why you don't want anything to do with them, and why you want to stay far, far, far away from them unless you're collecting them for home decor purposes like yours truly. So just for reference, I'm going to link down below my video on Zozo the Ouija board demon. I will also link down below my personal Ouija board story time in which I believe my roommate was possessed. My friend Haley kind of explained the difference between the Ouija board and basically saying to a spirit, if you want to make yourself known, go ahead and do that now. If you're doing something like an EVP session or a spirit box session or something like that, that's a lot different than a Ouija board, because a Ouija board has complete and total freedom to spell out anything that your heart desires in any language with any combination of letters and numbers. That's a lot of freedom, and you're also giving something permission to touch you, to use your hand as a vessel. When you invite something to basically move your hand on a planchette across a board and spell out messages, it's really not good news. I can honestly say after my experience with the Ouija board, I will never personally play with one again. To me, the risk isn't worth it. The portal that you're opening up is not worth it. I would much rather, if I'm truly curious about a place, communicate with a spirit in a much more kind of closed off way. An EVP reader, whether you're using an app on a phone or maybe a traditional EVP reader, that's just sort of picking up signals in the air. So if you're asking a spirit or an entity questions, it basically decodes them for you and puts it into words that you can understand. But it's kind of like taking those radio waves and whatever that it is and translating it into words. Whereas a Ouija board is literally saying, put your hands on me, go ahead, do whatever you're gonna do. The Ouija board also lies. A lot of the times you may get contacted by maybe a past loved one or someone in particular that you're hoping to talk to. And the spirits who speak to you through the Ouija board can often give you very like distinguished answers and very correct answers that you might think like, I'm talking to my grandfather, but the Ouija board can lie, and you might be talking to something totally different that's gaining power and energy through you to do malicious things or to haunt you or to just scare you, because a lot of the times that's what evil entities want to do. They want to scare you. They want to cause you emotional torment, and I don't think that there's anything worse than thinking I'm talking to my passed away loved one only to find out that it's like a demon or something really dark pretending to be that loved one. I think that that would hit pretty harshly. I personally love reading scary stories, and I found this list of some of the scariest true Ouija board stories in which people used a Ouija board and things went south. So I thought that today, after I kind of told you guys my personal opinion as to why you probably don't want to ask for one for Christmas, I would read you some horror stories to really bring the point home. So a few stories into this list, I realized that I recognized a few of them, and I thought I had just read them on the internet before, and in editing I realized that a few of them my friend Haley has told in a video before. It's kind of unavoidable in the horror community that we'll tell the same stories or cover the same subjects. People always accuse Haley and I of copying each other, but I've already talked to her. It's no big deal. You just may have heard a couple of these stories before. So here I have 17 true terrifying Ouija board stories to share with you all. When I was a kid, I played with a Ouija board with my friends. Everyone except me believed in spirits, so I kept asking the board to do more physical things, like tap on my shoulder. That's a no-no. The piece never moved, but suddenly my back started to sting. There were 3 handprints on my back, and they were red and puffy like I'd been slapped. I refused to touch a board again. And that oftentimes can happen when you ask a spirit to move outside of the board, when you give it permission to move outside and say, show me a sign, make the light flicker, touch me, or, you know, knock on the wall or something. That's when you can really start asking for trouble, because you've literally just said to something, it's okay, move outside the board. You can do whatever you want. My brother's friend played with a Ouija board at his house, and all hell broke loose. Their family would see pennies and marbles being thrown down the hallway. One day his mom was doing yard work and saw a dog, and when she called the dog, she said that it suddenly had an old man's face. Things got so awful they had to call a priest to do an emergency exorcism. To this day, they still see black shadow figures behind them. I got my board after months of harmless paranormal activity in my house. When I contacted something, the planchette started doing figure 8s across the board, which is a huge no-no. That means something demonic was present. I didn't touch it for months. When I tried again, I asked where the spirit was in my room. My vision went spotty. I saw a vivid image of my head jerking back, and the words, "with you," were whispered into my ear by something I couldn't see. I sold the board. I would have too. When I was 15, my grandma asked me to use a board to contact my uncle who died at birth. At first, it seemed like we were talking to my uncle, but as time went on, the personality of my uncle changed. He got mean and possessive, and finally the spirit told me that it had my uncle and it was coming for me. I blacked out for a full minute. When I came to, the light bulbs in the kitchen had popped and there was glass everywhere. We never played again. And this is what I was talking about. Sometimes entities won't even tell you that they're not your loved one, but in this case, they did. And can you imagine how heartbreaking that must be? And also how scary it is. One summer, my friends and I met the spirit of a boy named Jake through the board, and my friends kept antagonizing him to prove he was real. We were in the basement when the board had said to go to my room. There we found crayons that had been knocked over onto my floor, and a notebook on my bed opened up with the name Jake scrawled out in big letters. All of us had been together in the basement the entire time, and no one else was home. Our friend said we needed to break the board into pieces and stop the evil. So we did. When my son was in 4th grade, he came home from school saying he'd played with a Ouija board at recess, and that he and his friends talked to a 13-year-old boy who was alive during the Civil War. I didn't make a big deal out of it until a few days later when they played again and said the spirit was telling my son and his friends that they should join him and they could all be friends. I had to be the mean mom and call the school to put a stop to it. I worked at a haunted movie theater, and my coworkers and I thought it'd be fun to use a board in the building. We went to one booth where most of the activity had been happening, and a bunch of spirits kept interrupting one another. The board gave us 9 different names. One more malicious spirit called itself RD and kept telling us to go away, moving around in figure 8s for a few minutes before one of the candles tipped over. Weird things kept happening at that theater until the day I quit. Oftentimes figure 8s can be a sign of Zozo, the Ouija board demon, or just any dark and malicious entity. So I'm glad that he quit there and that nothing worse happened. Years ago, my mom and her friends were playing and the board spelled out pregnant. They were shaking as it proceeded to spell out my mom's name. And that's how she found out she was pregnant with me. Through a freaking Ouija board. Oh my God. I cannot imagine, like, not even taking a pregnancy test, like nothing, and finding out that you're pregnant through a Ouija board. Ugh. I was playing the board with some friends, and one of us had lost her dad in a trucking accident a few years before. We started asking the board questions, and it kept spelling out bridge and water. This is how her dad passed away. We were all skeptical until a hoodie that was hanging over the back of a chair flew across the room, like it had been picked up and tossed. We all scrambled, and that's the last time I ever went near one. And honestly, maybe that could have been her dad, but even more so, it may have been something negative and dark and cruel, just trying to make her think about the way that her dad died. Especially since it picked up a sweater and threw it. That just doesn't seem like a very friendly thing to do, you know? I was playing with my little brother on Halloween night when we were about 9 and 12. The board ended up spelling out a man's name, and then my mother's. I asked my mom about it, and her face went pale. She wouldn't tell me who the guy was. When I was 13, my friends and I decided to play with the board. Of course, as a boy crazy teen, I asked who I was going to marry, and it told me WTC3. I didn't think anything about it until years later when I met the man who is now my husband. His initials are WTC, and he is the third. No one ever believes me when I tell him, but it is true. Yep, exactly. They can tell you things like that. I remember Natalia Taylor once, she took down a lot of her Ouija board videos, and I hope she's well. I haven't heard from her in a long time, but she talked about how a Ouija board told her lottery numbers, and they were 1 digit off of every single lottery number. It knows, I promise. A friend and I met a woman through my board who said she was 40 before she died, and she was born in 91 BC. She spoke a dead language, so we just asked yes or no questions. She said her mother poisoned her, and she never knew why. We asked if this is what she wanted to tell us. She said yes. I have chills. Oof. It was pretty scary because it was like it came out of Supernatural or something. When my friends and I played, my question for the spirits was a bit more scary than everyone else's. I asked if God existed, but instead of God, I used God's name, Jehovah. Once I asked the question, the planchette flew out of the open window. I swear. I never touched one again. Later, when I was reading the Bible, it says that the demons shake in fear when you mention God's name because they know of his power. It's probably evidence then that they were talking to something awful. My husband and I were in the Navy together in 2011. There were security cameras in every corner of our building, with one computer holding all the footage. One night, we sat down right in view of a camera to play with a board. After 30 minutes and getting a few questions answered, we went to see if there was any activity happening around us on the cameras. The footage showed us sitting down with the board, and then the next 30 minutes of use were completely gone. The next image was us removing our hands from the planchette and getting up to leave. No other camera in the building had lost any footage for that time period. A common theme with Ouija boards is losing time. So you'll look at the clock and it's like you've lost an hour, you've lost 3 hours, you've lost 6 hours or whatever. It's almost like you black out and go into a daze, and maybe it's because you're in a trance or something has power over you and you've been possessed temporarily. But it is really strange that loss of time kind of translated into like camera footage going missing. That's pretty weird. In high school, my best friend and I bought a Ouija board and got into her car to go to a park to go play with it. After a few minutes, the feeling of absolute dread came over me. It felt like someone I loved had just died. I felt nauseous and had a heavy heart. It was so sudden that it startled me because I'd just been so pumped. I suddenly couldn't stop bawling, so I turned to my friend and she was crying too. Without even speaking, we were experiencing the exact same thing. We turned the car around, and as soon as we did, the feeling stopped. It took us years to finally touch the board again, and that was to throw it out. My great uncle had passed away, and I didn't make it to the funeral because of a school commitment. I never mentioned his death to my friends because he was 98, and we were never that close. About a week later, my friends and I started talking to the board, and one friend asked if it knew anyone in the room. It spelled my name. They asked how old it was, and it said 98. They asked his name and it spelled out Oliver, his name. I started to cry. The board then spelled out missed you, then went straight to goodbye. And I haven't touched one since. I have chills. So there's one of those circumstances where maybe they were talking to their grandfather, but those cases are so few and far between, and they rarely end that positively. Most of the time you hear Ouija board horror stories, not good Ouija board stories like that, you know. My dad bought an old house when I was in high school, so of course I had to try a Ouija board. My friend and I played in a room upstairs, and the rotary phone started to click, like the receiver was being tampered with. Weeks later, I was home alone watching TV downstairs when I heard the phone clicking upstairs again. We had another phone in the living room with a red light that would come on if the line was being used, and every time it clicked upstairs, the light came on beside me. Later that night as I tried to sleep, I felt hands on my shoulder starting to rock me back and forth. I assumed I was dreaming, but then I heard humming. It was terrifying. We moved out of that house, but I still have nightmares. Moral of this story is that when you use a Ouija board, when you give spirits any attention, you are giving them energy. You are giving them basically what they feed on to continue to haunt you or stay in your life or continue to be terrifying. If you're anything like me and you're obsessed with the paranormal, you love scary and spooky things, it might be tempting to pick up a Ouija board or maybe to ask for one for Christmas, but I promise you it's not worth it. That can outweigh so heavily that temporary high that you have while using one. So in my opinion, I don't think that you should spend the 20 some odd dollars on this thin cardboard piece of junk. Let me know any of your Ouija board stories in the comments down below. And I love you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you all very much and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.